kicked off something real proper, this topic, hasn't it? Red Bull circumventing the rules. And for the avoidance of that, look, this is Formula One, right? If you're not rubbing, then you're not racing, some will say. Sometimes you've got to bend a few rules in order to win a championship, drivers or constructors. Some say that you need to break a few eggs. There are requisite items that need ticking off in order to get back to the mountaintop. Ross Brawn would say that you read the rules not to see what they say, but to see what they do not say, to understand how you can leverage, how you can move between the cracks. The best F1 team, some say, move in silence and only speak when it's time to say checkmate. And that I understand. That's the reason why we come to the sport, watch every single race weekend, spend hours of our not infinite lifetimes delving deep into the minutiae, getting involved in the cracks and the rules and the regs and the amendments. However, we're going to speak to this. But why is no one else speaking to this, Cameron? Why is it only you that's speaking to this rule and reg change? Well, it's not, because the legend of Twitter that is Molly Marissa, she tweeted out in the first instance, not putting a name on the bullet, but alluding to the fact that the rules and the regs have been changed. Article 11.1.2 or whatever was amended to adjust retroactively for something that has happened on the grid. Asymmetric braking was the term that was used. Take that for whatever it is. But why still, Cameron, are people not talking about this? You on this topic, some say, are doing more harm than good. Well, you know what? As of last night, there are people better, more intelligent, infinitely more well-versed on things F1age than I that are now talking about it, because the legend that is friend of the channel, Peter D. Windsor, has put out a tweet talking about this asymmetric braking thing, the adjustment to the rules and what potentially it means for Red Bull, why all of a sudden their pace has dropped off. And that's not all, because by the way, Craig Scarbs, a legend of Formula One, one of the goatiest technical minds that you've ever seen, he's now tweeted out about it, and he says that this, as far as speculation and conjecture, well, for whatever that's worth, however much you want to invest in word on the curb, because everything that I'm saying needs to be prefaced with allegedly. We don't know for sure, but now that Craig Scarbs is talking about it, that gives credence to this. It is not just a pufferneer. We're not just connecting random dots and trying to make sense of it, because it, in and of its own merits, makes sense. Why all of a sudden, let me ask you these non-rhetorical questions. Why all of a sudden the drop off in performance since China? Why? What's caused that? It's not just curbing anymore. It's got to be something more substantial, surely. Why is Max Verstappen crying out loud each and every single time about not being able to turn the car in? Why? And why now? Why is Adrian Newey left? Why is Jonathan Wheatley left? Why now? This is the conversation that we need to have, and potentially the root cause analysis for all of the aforementioned may be disparate, maybe. But again, we've got to ask these questions. Why now is the legend that is Peter Windsor, again, one of the goatiest F1 journos to have ever F1'd. Why is he talking about it now? If again, there isn't smoke, there isn't fire causing this smoke. Now look, as far as official Red Bull sources, the legend that is Callum Nicholas, Red Bull engineer, dude who does the pit at the Bulls that are red. He's come out on Twitter, hasn't he? Unless this is a shill account that I'm reading. He's come out and denied all knowledge, saying, listen, I've been working on a car all my life and all this noise is nonsense. Dr. Obbs again, infinitely more connected on Twitter to Red Bull family than I ever will be. He's come out and said this is nonsense. It's clear that the news cycle in F1 is shallow and that people are picking at holes unnecessarily. But listen, sometimes you've got to engage in Occam's razor, right? Sometimes it's the simplest explanation that makes the most sense. We don't know for sure, but if I'm a betting man, and I'm betting on the most likely outcome, the most likely root cause analysis, I am going to connect the dots. Max Verstappen's rear right brake was the one that caused him an issue in Australia. If indeed you were to do a McLaren thing and have a second brake pedal, a third brake pedal type thing, which brake would you be effecting that upon? Your rear right, of course. Oh, what am I missing here, chat? Robert, can FIA strip all their points? No, right. You raise a brilliant point, Robert. Look, in Formula One, like I just mentioned, Ross Brawn says on a gazillion occasions, you read the rules not to see what they say at face value, to see what they do not say. That's why you will comb through the rules and regs. That's what Jonathan Wheatley was so brilliant at doing. Henceforth, if you find a gap in the rules and regs, as did Brawn in 2009 with the double diffuser, as have Red Bull with the bloody blown off diffuser back in the 2010s, if you can do that, if you find a cheeky gap in the rule, a crack in the rule, then you exploit that for whatever it's worth, however much you can. That's always been F1, and that's a beauty to F1. And Red Bull people will say that if you ask them, that all they've done is read the rules and regulations, spot a gap and exploit it for what it's worth. And that's legal. That's not cheating necessarily. However, on the flip side of that, on the other side of the fence, you will have those that say, listen, if you break the rules in absolute terms, then you are cheating. If you find a gap in the rule, then that's cheating. And I don't necessarily agree with that. Not necessarily. I mean, you would expect the FIA, the regulatory body, if anybody were cheating, bending / breaking the rules, you would expect the regulatory body of $1 billion industry in Formula One to wreak havoc, right? To leverage some serious material punishment against those who were perpetrators. You would expect. But maybe that's me being a bit too ambitious. Turtle says I don't think so, as they would have to have solid proof. Here's the proof. Look, Lobato, Spanish journalism, he said on a race weekend, a couple race weekends back, that he's sure he's had a conversation with a few senior officials on the grid, and they said that Red Bull have been told to take something off the car. That's what he said. Then again, not all F1 journalists and publications are created equally, but some more equal than others. Lobato is a serious figure, and for him to say that on a broadcast, you probably could take that to the bank. Also, look, around the time of Australia, if we're building a case, around the time of Australia, when you'll remember Maximilian Verstappen suffered a DNF at the hands of his rear right, you'll recall what Brembo said, right? A lot of people were looking to Brembo potentially because they were defunct. They were issuing faulty parts to Red Bull, and then shortly thereafter Charles Leclerc's Ferrari, who fell victim of glazing on his front brake disc, did he not? You'll recall that Brembo's statement was that we did nothing wrong. All our components on a post-mortem analysis were true, unfair and representative. There was nothing wrong with our parts. So then I ask you this, what happened to Max Verstappen's rear brake disc at Australia then, if it was nothing to do with Brembo and the parts that they'd issued to Red Bull? What happened? Sometimes the easiest, most obvious, the simplest explanation, the line of least resistance explanation, a la Occam's razor, is the one that you should defer to, and that's what I'm doing in this instance. And again, speculation and conjecture 101 this. There is nothing definitive here. Red Bull people are denying all knowledge. However, what would you expect them to do? In a sport where you read the rules, not to see what they say, but to see what they don't say so that you can exploit it. Do you really think if this were the truth? If this were the truth, I preface everything I'm about to say with caveats that this is speculation and conjecture, but do you really think if Red Bull was doing something dodgy as far as inertia valves that the FIA have since come out and amended the rules to account for and told them not to do anymore? Do you really think a Red Bull employee is going to sacrifice their job and their livelihood vicariously by coming out and admitting what they've done? Do you really think a Red Bull employee whose livelihood is dependent on them being a going concern, short to medium term, do you really think that a Red Bull employee is going to come out and say, you know what, yeah, no, you got us, We had this inertia valve on the car, and we're going to come out and admit, if the FIA aren't telling you, team principal Christian Horner's not telling you, nor is Stefano Domenicali, head of the commercial rights holder, if they aren't saying anything about this, what makes you think that an employee, a measly employee of Red Bull, not a senior stakeholder or a chairman or a CEO or the team principal, what makes you think for a second that somebody connected to Red Bull by virtue of them being an employee is going to come out and go, mea culpa, you know what, we did have an inertia valve. Everything that you're saying is true and fair and representative. Absolutely not going to happen. This is Formula One. How, by the way, do you like your F1 if not scordugerous and salacious and cloak and daggers? It has always been that, and it always will be that. Nothing need to see here, eh? Prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.